had 1.2 million in capital gain that I paid no tax on. It's still sitting in the trust and I still haven't paid tax on it. The other thing is that most people don't really understand the tax code or realize that about
Meet Chris Shockowitz, Chief Operating Officer and Chief Executive Officer at defertax.com. Chris brings a rare background to wealth management, having spent years leading major technology projects at Intel. He helps business owners and real estate investors save millions using advanced, multi-layered tax strategies.
Talk a little bit about the training programs that you guys have in place and your path to recruit and educate more people around these options that are available to them.
our goal is to basically be able to make available to the average person the tax strategies that are usually reserved for the very wealthy. I have not yet seen a technology that people inherently would trust.
This world of AI, everybody thinks so AI can automate this, but what you're doing differently is really embracing that human side of it. And take us through what you're thinking as you look to grow and focus on the human aspect of things.
Yeah, so if we take a step back,
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another version of Leaders of the Workplace of Tomorrow. Today we have Chris Shockowitz with Equity Advisors and Defer Tax. And Chris, you've spent years in the technology world, which is can be rare for wealth managers and financial advisors. But would love to have you share kind of your background and story and where that all began and how you ended up doing tax planning and wealth investments.
well, thanks for having me. When I was graduating high school, going into college, I, did well from a grades perspective. I really liked math and science a lot. And so I basically, when I was going to college, I started off doing, calculus, chemistry, physics, all the hard sciences. I was in a few honors classes. And it was funny because my father, I had this take home chemistry exam, and he was saying, I was complaining that it was a hard exam. He goes, "Well, what are you going to do with that anyway?" And I kind of went, "Well, you're right." So I basically quit school, and at the end of that semester, I was still taking classes at night, but I decided I just wanted to live life some. So I was an automotive mechanic. I rebuilt cars, and while I was in high school and in college, so I enjoyed hot rods and rebuilding things, getting into the internal workings of machinery. I was an electrician. I was a foreman at a loading dock. I was the lead person for a assembly team while I was going to school during the day and working at night. This is electronic assembly components, essentially. Uh,
A lot of jobs, a lot
yeah,
of range. Yeah.
manufacturing, logistics, just all kinds of different stuff. And then I got this job at Amtotal Corporation as a mainframe computer company. They hired me in the warehouse, and then I was just good at the job, so they kept on promoting me, and eventually I was actually the master scheduler for their main product line. It was a $1 billion product line built across 5 manufacturing locations, one in Ireland and the rest in the US. But I had never finished my college degree, so I decided, okay, it's time, to, they weren't really promoting me to the level I should have been for the work I was doing. So I went back to college, and after that, I ended up working in Intel Corporation, which was a great company. This was back in the 90s when it was growing rapidly. The stock was splitting basically every 2 years. I came in an IT position as a programmer, and then I just kept on kind of moving up through various things. I ended up running a lot of different large technology projects. The biggest one was about 115 people around the world, where we were putting a whole suite of e-commerce solutions together in 1999. That was pretty early. I did some really complex technology stuff. I've done basically systems where our ERP systems were talking to 220 other companies' ERP systems, executing about 50,000, 55,000 transactions a day automatically, machine to machine. And this was in like 2004. So this is all leading edge technology. So I always got to be like on the front end of the development technology. I was working with Microsoft when they created Microsoft Agent and Sybase when they created SQL Server, the database. It's going off the mainframe and onto the PC. I was working with Microsoft on the NT operations system. I worked with Google when they were doing the search engines for enterprise solutions. Just a lot of technology work. And then eventually, when I left Intel, I was looking for something different to do, And I always had the thought of writing some science fiction novels. So I actually wrote a couple of science fiction novels. But then I was getting bored with that and looking around for something to do. And I was selling a property in Santa Clara, California. Basically, I bought it for 575K. I had sold it for 1.7 million, and I was looking for realtors to list it. And one of them said, "Hey, I know this guy who can reduce the taxes on the sale of your
Yeah.
property." And I'm like, "Really?" And so I basically met that person. That's my current business partner, Carl Worden. We just hit it off, and so I had 1.2 million in capital gain that I paid no tax on. It's still
Yeah.
sitting in their trust, and I still haven't paid tax on it.
And talk about that, because I think one thing I find interesting is with your background in technology. What ultimately what makes you really good at what you guys do is understanding the code, right? The product, right, as it relates to filing taxes and how to be more efficient with your investments and around the tax code. But how does that kind of translate? Because in essence, like it's almost like you're taking your product development skills and applying it to the wealth management world.
Yeah, that's exactly right. When I look at it, it's just another, when you're doing very large programs, the financials are a big part of it. There's the people skills, the people management, the actual, program itself that you're managing. The program has finances associated with it. I also actually owned and managed real estate while I was working at Intel. So I went from an 8-unit apartment complex and kept flipping it, and I went to an 85-unit complex. It was all my money. Bought it for it was about 12.5 million. And when I got out of it right before 2007 because I had a cousin who told me that, hey, the financial system, they actually worked in the financial system in Japan. They said, hey, the same thing that happened in Japan is going to happen in the US. You should get out now. And so I believed him. So I got out and I paid a ton of taxes. I had to pay taxes on over $3 million. And so by the time you pay that tax bill, that's it's pretty painful when you spend all this time basically building up all this wealth and just to watch a big chunk of it go away, especially in California where the taxes are high. So when I exited Intel and I was looking for something to do that was meaningful, I had a lot of financial acumen. I had a lot of business acumen from working in Intel, a lot of real estate acumen from when I did my real estate adventures. So getting into this space, it was really just taking those skills and then, I could talk to somebody like I have a person who's selling essentially an insurance company. It's all P&C, pretty vanilla insurance stuff, but, the company's worth $12 million and they're selling it where they're getting 8.5 million up front, then getting some payouts over time. So I understand how that works. When I talk to that person, what I realized is that they never did the due diligence on their LOI. So, I actually brought him to a lawyer, and I'm hooking him up with a business analysis person to just do a double check to see if they're actually giving you us a fair price, right? Based on all the details of your business, is that number, 12 million, is that the right number or should it be more? They didn't know, right? They just didn't know the questions to ask. And so what I really find as you're talking to people about different tax scenarios, it's just knowing what questions to ask. And the other thing is that most people don't really understand the tax code or realize that about maybe 10% of the tax code is actually designed to tell you how much you owe in taxes. All the rest
Yeah.
of it is telling you ways that you cannot pay taxes. So the tax code is really a steering mechanism, but our financial industry is broken from the perspective that all of professionals that work with you, they all work in their little silos. The tax attorney is in their silo, the real estate brokers in their silo, CPA is in their silo. CPAs are taught to tell you how much you owe in taxes, not how to save in taxes. So when I started working with Carl, we had 12 different solutions. We now have over 20. And it's just basically when you're looking out in the environment and you're making your presence known, you'll see things going on and say, oh, your company's doing this tax strategy, your company's doing this tax strategy, your company's doing that tax strategy. Well, if you go out on the internet and you try to figure out what you want to do, the difficulty is you're going to find all of these companies with all these different strategies, but you don't know how they all fit together or if it's even the one for your situation. So basically, we have the experience from working with hundreds of people through these scenarios of knowing which tax strategies work and then educating the client on what works and what doesn't work for their situation and let them choose what's the right thing for them, including, hey, I just want to pay the tax. That's a fair answer.
Take us through what that looks like as a customer, or I imagine there's partners and people that I mean, ultimately, it's education, right? It's awareness and education and allowing people to know what's possible. And what might be helpful is like, what are some of those areas or those misconceptions, right, around like selling an investment property, selling a business? Yeah, I think there's some of these taxable events that everybody just assumes I'm going to pay a bunch of taxes. And like, when do they engage with someone like you, or what partners should they work with? Like, how do they get more information on this stuff?
Yeah. So if you take a step back, when we engage with someone, the first thing we're trying to do is to figure out if they even have a tax problem. So we're going through the details with them and educating them and understanding what their scenario is. We want to know what your goal is. What do you want to do with the money? What is the asset? What is the scenario? And then when we go through those numbers, probably 10% of the time, they didn't realize they didn't have a tax bill because they just weren't educated on, that portion of the tax code. So, we're not wasting anybody's time, right? So we'll get right to the point of whether you have a problem or not. Then we can quantify how big the problem is and then start getting into here's the different solutions. Now, depending on your objective or what you want to do with the money, different scenarios are better than others depending on, how you want the funds to end up. You want to take the funds and use them to pay off bills, we're going to do a different strategy than if you want to take the funds and go invest them and grow your wealth. They're kind of two opposite ends of the spectrum. The good news is we got solutions depending on which way you want to go. We also have ways of if you've already sold the assets, we can actually just reduce the tax bill by up to 50%. And in some cases more than that. Because what we do is we basically help people reduce, defer, or eliminate personal income taxes, business income taxes, and capital gains taxes. Those are really kind of the three domains that drive most of the taxes in the country. And then there's scenarios that work for each one of those. So, for example, you're saying investment real estate. Well, what a lot of people don't know is we have 17 different solutions for investment real estate in terms of how you can reduce, defer, or eliminate the tax bill. And depending on your numbers and your goal, you might do different things. So, for example, I had one person that said, "Oh, I've got this, 1.1 million in equity coming out of my investment property, and I want to do a 1031 exchange and go buy a primary residence." Say, well, you can't do a 1031 exchange and buy a primary residence. You have to buy like kind investment property. However, what you can do is we can put you into an intermediate investment from your 1031 exchange, which would give you 85% cash back, tax free, that you can then use to go put that money into your primary residence. And when I share that with people, like people say, well, I can't do a 1031 exchange and buy a primary residence, right? Well, it's like,
Yeah.
well, you can't, but I can. Let me show you how.
Right.
We're daisy chaining together multiple different strategies that gets that money out tax free.
For sure. Yeah, it's the actual outcome. Like, yeah, maybe you can't do that directly, but you could still use all the cash to purchase the property.
You can still do it indirectly and not pay the tax bill. So really what we do is 110% education. We feel
Yeah.
our goal is to educate someone. First off, do they have a tax bill? Then what their options are. And in some cases, I'm even helping them figure out what their goals are because they just don't know. It's funny,
Yeah.
about 90% of the time, I'll ask somebody, what do you want to do with the money? And they'll say, that's a good question. Or they say, I have no idea, but I know I don't want to do another 1031 exchange, or I know I don't want to do this. And
Yeah.
so what we'll do is have a conversation and zero in. But what we're doing is educating them first and foremost, and then they can make the decision to go forward or not. It's not, a high pressure sales tactic.
Yeah. And talk a little bit about, because you say education, but it's not just the end client, right? You're actually also educating a lot of these wealth advisors or people looking to get into the space. So talk a little bit about the training programs that you guys have in place, and your path to recruit and educate more people around these options that are available to them, and what you guys are doing to expand your footprint.
Yeah. So our goal is to, basically be able to make available to the average person the tax strategies that are usually reserved for the very wealthy, primarily the very wealthy because they can afford the professionals that are essentially figuring out the taxes for them, right? However, what's funny is we've gotten to the point that we've got so many different strategies is we've got more strategies than the average professional does. So what we do is we help, investors, but in addition, we actually have a training program for investment advisors, and we've got kind of three levels to it. So one level we call a tax deferral consultant. they joined our tax deferral accelerator training program, and we basically teach them the various strategies. And then we start by understanding, what's their specialty, what types of clients are their ideal clients, and then we'll start with the strategies that are a good fit for the people they already work with, and then essentially start expanding from there over time, because it's just too much to learn in 6 months even. There's a lot of detail to it. But in that program, we're the backstop. So we actually are the coach or your mentor available to you. So as you're going through the scenario of learning, and then you get to the point where you're working with clients, we can come in and even sit down with you and your clients and help you see how we basically do the strategies and how those strategies apply to your clients. And no matter how skilled you are, you're still going to run into situations that are unique because just everybody's deal is different. And so we act as the backstop for them to basically bounce the ideas off or to say, hey, I've run into a scenario I've never seen before. How do we deal with it? So we're basically the coach and mentor to them.
Yeah.
If people are good at what they're doing, we offer them the opportunity to be a franchisee. So they would have a part of the country where they would be the tax consultant for that part of the country. And then for some people, we actually also offer them to join our RIA. So we actually have an RIA, we have a tax strategy company, and then we have that advisor training company, which trains investment advisors on, how to do tax strategies. That last one, the website is called taxdeferralstrategies.com. For the tax strategies overall for clients, that's defertax.com, DEFERTAX. Then for our investment advisors, we actually don't even have a website because we don't bring clients in through the websites and try to sell them directly. We actually engage with people with the tax strategies. And from there,
Yeah.
when you save somebody $1 million in taxes, they want to find out, what you can do for them to manage their money.
Yeah. So with your background and you talked about leading teams and projects at Intel and some of your past. Frankly, I think a lot of advisors are focused on just growing their own assets, right? And AUM. So I like what's kind of will you explain a little bit your background and how you're looking at the development of people. And in this world of AI, everybody thinks so AI can automate this, but one thing you're doing differently is really embracing that human side of it. And take us through what you're thinking as you look to grow and focus on the human aspect of things.
Yeah. So if we take a step back, everything you do from business is all people, process, and tools. And it's how you're putting together those pieces, pre-built process and tools that are essentially defining how much friction there is within your company. Do you have people in the right jobs? Do they have the right skill sets? Have they got the right training? Do they have the right tools supporting them? Do the tools essentially perform the correct functions to meet the needs of your clients? Because every organization out there, you're basically always serving three masters. So you're serving your clients, you're serving your employees, and you're serving the goals of the business in terms of revenue, right?
Yeah.
And those all three tie together. So you've got the three, clients, employees, revenue for the business. You've also have piece of people, process, and tools. So when I was working at Intel, I worked there for 25 years. When I started managing people directly, I thought, it's important to be a student of what you manage. So if you're going to manage people, you should study people. You should understand people. And I used a tool called StrengthsFighters 2.0 that I really liked a lot. There's a lot of different tools out there. But what it would do is it allowed me to basically look into that person and what their strengths are. And a lot of companies, they get very focused on their employees' weakness and try to improve their weakness. And the reality is what I've discovered over time is some people are just not going to be good at some things, but they're going to be great at other things. What you have to do is look at people's strengths and look at putting them to the job that actually leverages their strength, not try to, basically beat them up for having a weakness. Well, that means they're in a job that's playing to something that's not their strength. So they should probably get moved around. But anyway, so like at Intel, I had 150 people working for me. They were in multiple different sites, different geographies, and they were all assigning people to a project. And that project would basically have to form again and again and again every single time. So that project team would never get experience. So instead, I changed it so I co-located at each site the full project team, and we would assign projects to a project team. So we would understand the skills and the capabilities of that team, and my managers were building efficient teams, and those efficient teams could literally work on anything they have the skills for. And since I
Yeah.
had over 100 different products, but I only had seven, or actually I had 10 teams, I had way more products than I had teams. So we would prioritize what gets worked on and assign it to the team that had the skills to do it as soon as they came available. And we used our agile development methodology, et cetera. It's all people, process, and tools. So there was the tool around managing demand. There was the process, agile. There was the people and their skill sets, and we were optimizing all of those things. So when I look from a tax perspective, we really took a very similar strategy of saying, okay, what are the strategies that we're providing? Who are the people that we're providing them for? What are the processes and the skills that we need to basically function in this business? And we divided it up into three different businesses that had three different skill sets, right? So the investment advisor skill set's very different from the tax strategist skill set. The tax strategist, myself and my partner, we're the super skilled guys at the taxes, but we're also very skilled in investment advising. So what are we doing? We're training investment advisors and we're training the people in our program to learn the tax strategies. So they only have to get to a certain level to be able to start engaging with customers and making transactions. The other thing is that in our overall training program, what we do is if you look at it, there's over 330,000 investment advisors in the country, and all of them are all competing for your exact same client. And what's going to differentiate you from everybody else out there? Well, taxes is a huge differentiator because basically, if you're selling, something, and let's say you had to pay 40% in taxes, if I can save you on those taxes, I'm providing you more value than the average investment advisor can give you in 10 years,
Right.
simply
Right.
on the taxes. And then we're going to
Yeah.
compound that growth on top of it. Right. So it's a huge differentiator. Also, people who learn our tax strategies, they have bigger ticket items and they work with higher net worth clients because those are the people that have the tax problem. If somebody's got a 10K tax problem, yeah, I could help you with that, but my time's going to be better served helping somebody with the 100K or the $1 million tax problem. So when we then go look at the company and drill into the company and the people, process, and tools, and specifically we're looking at the advisory company, what do we need for the system that's going to be behind essentially this company? And we wanted to get deep into the system before we went and grew the company. Because if you grow the company and try to change the system, that's just a nightmare. So if we can get the system 80, 90% of the way there and then evolve it as we grow, well, then there's just a huge headache that's off our plate. We could focus on growing the company instead of focus on trying to fix the system. And basically, when you look at any system type of a view, again, people, process, and tools, what's the man machine boundary? What do the people do? What does the system do? The system has to have accuracy of the data. If you don't have accurate data in the system, it's all garbage anyway. So you have to basically design your data model or your object model. You then design your processes. Then you basically, say the training you have to do for the people. So we're being very systemic in terms of how we approach that problem. And then, like right now, we've got basically 10 IARs in our investment advisory firm. There's only two of us that are on the system right now. We're going to then bring on two more, and then we're going to bring on two more. We're going to do it slowly, and we're going to basically tune out the system. So then, when we decide to flip the switch and start moving quickly to hire, because we would like
Yeah.
to end up with about 200 advisors instead of 10, well, we'll have a system that's already designed to scale. They can
Yeah.
scale the back end support services, what they call a CSA or customer service analyst, and then on the advisor side of it, and the advisors interacting with the clients. And to the extent I can make both of those teams efficient, then I need least less CSAs to provide the back office work for X number of advisors. And if the advisors have somebody doing the back office work for them in a tool that's very well designed, then they can focus more time on getting more clients. So it's
Yeah.
basically scaling the business in a stair step function.
And what are some of the things you've done, in the past and currently to build that culture, right, around people collaborating and ultimately it's the systems built by the people in the organization, right? And like they're the ones who have the knowledge and the domain expertise. So like how are you ensuring they're engaged and a part of that process and frankly how if any has AI changed any of that in your time in that technology world?
Yeah. So at a high level, I do view when you look at investment advising or tax strategy advising, it all comes down to not just your skill and your systems and your knowledge, et cetera, but it comes down to trust. And I have not yet seen a technology that people inherently would trust, especially with something as important as your personal finances, right? So I think the human element is absolutely critical in our business and must be nurtured and grown because people don't, they don't trust a machine, right?
Yeah.
They're going to trust a human being. They're going to build a relationship with a human being. But I fundamentally believe the human element is critically important in the future. And to the extent that companies go and try to automate everything and use AI to be your advisor, et cetera, good luck with that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna flip the exact opposite way, and I'm gonna build a human connection and a human touch, and at least for the foreseeable future, maybe the next 10 years, I think that's still gonna be a critical element of doing business in the financial space.
Yeah.
When you go look at really good advisors, they have networks of people and they know who to go to. So, for example, I just had a client I was on the phone earlier today. They're selling a business. They're worried that the company that is making them an offer is lowballing them. So, and they didn't know who to turn to. So we were talking about tax strategies for the sale of the business. So I hooked him up with a business broker who's basically going to do an analysis on the value of the company. We'll do a very high level, inexpensive analysis to say, well, what's the ballpark of where you should be? Is this in the ballpark where you should be? If so, I've also connected him with an M&A attorney, mergers and acquisitions. He's basically going to help him through the rest of the process because he has no idea how to do mergers and acquisitions. He knows how to run an insurance company, right? So again, it's that human relationships and connecting and knowing the people that are basically I can trust with my client who are skilled
Right.
that I know that they have the capability. And I've got, commercial real estate broker. I've got a residential real estate broker, mortgage broker, insurance broker, M&A attorneys, tax attorneys. I mean, just, title, escrow, business consultants,
Yeah.
business valuators. And then I have all these people that are all part of my team that I regularly interact with, and I know that they've got the skills to do the job right. And so I
Yeah.
would save that guy a bunch of time. And what would happen if he found somebody who didn't know what they were doing, and that could impact his ability to sell, right?
Yeah, I think the concern with AI is there's so many companies that can take the shortcut, right, and just trust the AI, but finding organizations like yours who are so committed to that relationship and ensuring their success, right? It just
Well, I also think it's worse than that because in the AI, I don't know if you ever noticed, but if you get in there and if you ask it a question and it got it wrong, and so you say, okay, do I have to change my question or, what do I need to do? What's funny is if you just keep asking the same question again and again, it'll eventually agree with you, which is not what you want when you're making legal and financial decisions, right?
right, right, exactly. Yeah,
So, the solution isn't typing and typing and typing until you get the answer that you want. Is the truth the answer you don't want, right? And you need to be aware of that and then make the appropriate changes, right? And so, how do you validate that stuff with the AI? But if you're talking to a person who's got a business license and a degree and is good at their job, they have experience at it, well, guess what? If they're wrong, they have liability insurance and you
yeah.
have somebody to go after. Can I go after AI if
Yeah.
they told me the wrong thing? No, I can't.
Yeah, it's that balance, right? And that's yeah, where I see use AI as the accelerator or amplifier, but you still have a human overlook or someone in the organization overlooking to validate that yes, it was done correctly and accurately, and that's to me where the long term value of AI is truly valuable.
Being able to, if I could replicate myself and my business partner as somebody who can give a 90% right answer, to somebody without having to talk to me on the phone because I only have so much time in the day. I think that's a good angle for AI. In addition, I think we were talking about kind of the human aspect of the business and how do we go manage that. You and I and our business consultant are talking about, well, what are the indicators we're going to put in place for this business and how we're going to use that to measure if the advisors are doing what they're supposed to do and are they taking advantage of all of the things that we can offer them. If you have an advisor that just does one thing all the time, are they being lazy? Or they just don't understand, all of the other stuff
Yeah,
available to them? Or is that just their niche and that's where they're going to stay? Is being able to look into the business with indicators and look for problems before they
yeah,
become a big problem, or look for barriers to growth so that you can remove those barriers, et
yeah.
cetera. Also, I think AI could have a place because that's pretty standard business stuff. Where if you can teach the AI your business, you can have it basically look for these indicators instead of me spending hours looking through reports.
Yeah.
I can let AI say, "Hey, I'm going to flag these 5 things to you every month or whatever."
Yeah, and to kind of commend you for as you're working with your strategic coach, right? A lot of this is just about intent, right? Like what is the intent for growth and how do we identify those metrics before they even happen or exist, right? And there's some of this stuff where your vision is laid out there and we're identifying those metrics and it's like we're already building it even though it might not have started yet. And I think there's so much value in pre-identifying those metrics because like that ultimately that becomes your North Star and guides you, right,
Yeah.
to where you want to go.
Yeah. And you can fix problems early.
Yeah, and kind of along those lines, why don't you share a little bit of what's next for you and deferred tax and where you guys are looking to grow and expand and what parts of the country, what partnerships, clients, and kind of leading into, how can people learn more about you and where to follow you?
Yeah, well, we have 50 advisors in our program. We had 2 franchisees. We have, 10 IARs. And what we want to do is we would like to get to well over 400 people in our training program. We'd like to get to 100 franchisees and 100 advisors in our direct company. And the idea being that we would essentially go after the business in 3 ways. So one is just lead generation. I'll call it cold lead generation, which we have a whole methodology for that we're going after. The other is we have a very successful program with dinner seminars. And then we have a very successful program with what we call centers of influence. And it's basically ways of building a team in your local area of those other professionals that I talked about that essentially become part of your team. And now you have a collective view in your city, your county, your state, whatever, that you can't possibly have the time to get on your own. And so when the deals are happening in your domain, you get wind of them, you have a shot at. It doesn't mean you land them all, but you don't even know they exist before. Now
Yeah.
they at least exist. So it's getting that center of influence strategy with the right people in your local area. That would tend to be either a franchisee or somebody working in our company. What we would do is we would help them grow their business by coming out to wherever it is, their office and basically put into our place or people process and tool systems, right?
Yeah.
And then basically allowing them to grow and expand and basically differentiate themselves with the tax strategies.
Yeah. How much productive and even efficient, right? I mean, when you talk about aligning people, processes, and tools, but you're talking about extending that beyond your organization, right? But I mean, that to me, that just makes the process that much easier for these customers who don't want to have all these meetings and conversations multiple times with multiple people. They want a whole team they can trust.
Yeah, they can basically have that one throat to choke or one-stop shop, however you wanna say it. But I think in addition to that, we believe that we can hit 3 billion in our IRA by 2030, if we follow this pattern. We've done the numbers, and if you think about it, that means each one of those people that are in those top tier seats, they're $100 million advisors. So there's good opportunities here. So
Yeah.
we're starting off in, Reno as kind of our proof point, and then basically our whole plan is to just start going out cookie cutter metropolitan area by metropolitan area. We have a lot of familiarity with Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Idaho, Arizona. So we'll probably start there, but then we'll start, moving east.
Well, very cool. And where can people find you online, LinkedIn, any social sites? Where's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, the best way to get in touch with us is if you go to deferredtax.com/Chris. You can get access to my calendar. There's also deferredtax.com to learn more about the strategies that we have. If you're an investment advisor, taxdeferralstrategies.com is our entry point for investment advisors to learn about us. If you're in real estate, you're doing 1031 exchanges, 1031, we have startandexchange.com, startan and exchange.com. And it's the simplest place on the internet to go start an exchange. You literally fill out 8 fields, and 24 hours later, your exchange will be up. It's $1,000 flat fee.
And that's a 1031, yeah, 1031 exchange.
Yep. that's one of our big lead generators, is just doing and learning changes.
Well, great. Well, hey, Chris, thank you so much for being on and sharing some of your knowledge and a wealth of experience and information. And look forward to hearing more about where you guys are going in the future.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me on.
Yep, absolutely.